Captain Alok Bansal ji to kindly go ahead with the proceedings of this session. Okay, I request Shri Vinod Bavre ji, the Director of India Foundation, to kindly take over from here. Without much ado.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is really a very special session with two very special people. Could I ask you all to kindly sit down and put your cell phones off? This session is being chaired by a very good friend of ours, General V.K. Singh, who is the Minister for External Affairs. Could I request you, sir, to come? And the keynote address of this is being addressed by Mr. Avi Dichter. He's the chairman of Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. He's also a member of the parliament there. And you know what happens in the parliament in Israel. So could I now ask General V.K. Singh to kindly take over?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here on a very interesting, very current and a subject that I think concerns most of the people who transit through the Indian Ocean region. We would be speaking on terrorism, its ramifications, how things are today, basically focusing on West Asia. But what I would certainly like is that we do this projection into rest of the area which borders West Asia, because it does concern India, it does concern all the countries which live on the Indian Ocean rim. Because these things, for various reasons which are happening in West Asia, have been able to percolate into many areas, many countries, where the ideology has affected a great many to come under the so-called flag of terrorism. I'm quite sure Avi is going to throw a great light on it. And it will be my endeavor subsequently to summarize a few things that he has said and add some things which I think are important for us to bear on. So Avi, the floor is all yours.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me here. Thank you, V.K. Singh, for your introduction. I would say that up until 35 years ago, countries who are fighting terrorists in the Middle East or West Asia are used to define two basic conditions in those fighting against terrorists. The first condition was tools, whether it's a pistol, a gun, hand grenade, knife. And the second intention, intention to use it against people. Only obeying those two basic conditions as a security man, according to the law in every country, you are allowed to open fire in order to block the terrorist, and even if it's needed, to kill him. At the 70s, at the 80s, passenger aircraft were hijacked by terrorists using guns, pistols, hand grenades. And in many cases, in airports and other places, attacks were foiled or not. by the counterterrorism troops, police, or other security men. At that time, we know that there were very tight connections and cooperation between terror organizations. And as Mr. Akbar said yesterday, it was tight connections between terror organizations and less connections between countries who are fighting terrorists. If we all remember when the Palestinian terror organization at that time, together with Baader Meinhof from Germany, together with the Red Japanese Army, in some cases under the leadership of the arch-terrorist Carlos the Jackal, carried out very tough terror attacks. But since then, we've seen another dimension of terror was added to the battery of terror activities. And that's the system of suicide bombings. We haven't seen it in the Middle East for a long time. We heard about it in other countries, even here in the central part of Asia. But in the west side of Asia, we started to see it only at the beginning of the 80s. It's very important because suicide bombers, you see none of the two basic conditions. You don't see the tool because they are putting the bombs on a vest or any other device on their body. And you don't see intentions. I haven't seen one case that a security man opened fire towards a suicide bomber or a potential suicide bomber that he suspected him to be a suicide bomber. As a matter of fact, I remember only one case in London in 2004, post the terror attacks at the tubes in London, when a Brazilian guy came to the station, jumped above the entrance, and a policeman, thinking he is a terrorist who is trying to run and to detonate himself, opened fire, killed him, and it came out a mistake. When we deal with suicide bombers in our region, it's very problematic. First of all, the majority I mean more than 95% of the suicide bombers are not from the hardcore of the terror organization. There are almost last-minute recruitments. You can find males, females, adults, teenagers, majority between 17 to 24, married, bachelors, smart people, students, or illiterate people. It's not the job of miserable people only, unlike what we sometimes thought. But all of them are very fanatic. I remember a case when a suicide bomber ran towards a group of Israelis, soldiers and civilians, detonated himself with 10-kilogram explosives on his back. Thank God the TNT explosives didn't explode, just for a technical failure. And what was exploded was only the detonator itself. The suicide bomber was the only person to get injured, and he lost consciousness and was taken to a hospital nearby. The interrogator who went to the hospital to question him the minute he opened an eye, waited a few hours, and then he opened the eyes, saw someone is staring above him, and he asked him, "Hey man, do you know where you are?" He looked at him and said, "Definitely, I'm in heaven." He said, "You are not in heaven. You are in hospital. Both starts with an H, but it's definitely not heaven." And they started an argument, the interrogator and the terrorist, about the real location. Finally, the interrogator said, "All right, let's start from the beginning. Who am I?" He looked at him and said, "You? You are a bloody Israeli." The interrogator knew how to bite his lips. And he said, "Yes, I'm an Israeli. I'm even Jewish. But tell me, Are the Jews in heaven? He looked and said, hey man, you're right. No Jews in heaven. So I'm possibly in hospital. And he started to pour information. That's a kind of fanaticism that we thought it's only to poor people. No. We had another case with a student who was recruited in order to carry out a bomb in Jerusalem, to kill himself in a bus with a devastating belt. We caught the commander of the cell, and he gave us the whole story, that there is a student who smuggled the belt with a woman in Jerusalem. She put it in a hidden place, and he has to collect it and to carry out the bomb or the mission in a bus in Jerusalem, either on Sunday or Monday, but definitely not on Tuesday, which is very odd for us, but terrorists. A few days later, we caught the student. After a while, he gave us the accurate location of the belt. We went with him, we found the belt, and we exploded the bomb. Now we got back to the center, and we asked, all right, what's the story about Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? The student. He said, that's very simple. Sunday, Monday, I have nothing special in university. Tuesday, I have an exam. And trust me, even if you are well trained, sometimes it frustrates you, or surprises you, or both. Terrorists in the West Asia are not guerrilla fighters. I can assure you that in many cases, when we heard that they are trying to carry out terror attacks only against security soldier or policemen, but civilians and citizens are a very tempting target. Because it's very easy to find them. It's very easy to hit them. Normally they don't respond with fire. And civilians, in the eyes of terrorists all over, in West Asia and I believe in other parts of the world, civilians have dual purpose. One, to be the targets for those terrorists to hit. Never mind if it's a bomb, if it's a car bomb, if it's rockets. Try to imagine that we are facing, during the last decade, just from Gaza Strip, 15,000 rockets towards Israeli cities. Inside the Green Line. Forget about the territories, whatever. And the second goal that citizens have to play, in eyes of terrorists, is to be the human shields of terrorists. We see it all over. We see it today in Iraq. We see it in Syria. We see it in Lebanon. We see it in the Palestinian Authority. We see it all over, even in Yemen. Terrorists surround themselves with this human shield. It's very easy. Nobody will say no, because he knows if he says no, he becomes a target. And it's very easy. At the first Intifada in Israel, 600 people got killed by terrorists. 600 people in Gaza Strip. 97% of them were innocent people. They got killed for blaming them for collaborating with Israel. Only 3% has some kind of relations with Israel. So 97% out of 600 people got killed for nothing. And I know that as counterterrorism organizations, and here are sitting experts for so many countries, including from here, from India, who know something about how to fight terrorists, how to confront terror attacks. And we all know terrorists are activating when they can and when it pays off. The problem is that countries who are fighting terrorists, who are determined in fighting terrorists, they have to fight terrorists all the way, all the time, 24/7 because there is no fair play against terrorists. Never think about fighting in a fair play against terrorists. It doesn't work. If you try to go with the passion of terrorists and with the pace of their activities, you are going to lose the war. You have to be on a constant fighting against terrorists because the secret is how to take terrorists from 90% of the time to carry out terror attacks and 10% of the time to survive, to hide themselves. You have to change the timetable. So 90% of the time they will be in Iran. They know that you are on their tail. And only 10% of the time they will be able to carry out terror attacks. That's the first winning, the first victory of terror gangs. And the second point, there is no fair play against terrorists. Sometimes, and I'm sure that you've heard it from your people, some people say, well, it's just 2-3 terrorists are hiding in a building or in the bushes, armed with Kalashnikov rifles and hand grenades. Let's bring a group of 10 soldiers, 10 policemen, let them do the job. At the end of the clash, 2 terrorists will get killed, but you might lose 1 or 2 of your own. That's why whenever it's needed, I recommend you all. I recommended my people many years. If it's needed, it's authorized to fight with an F-16 jet against a terrorist and arch terrorist with an M16 rifle. If that's the only way. Because otherwise, if you are seeking for a fair play, maybe you are going to catch the terrorist or to kill him, but you are going to lose your own people with no need. Now, I know that we've heard, and probably you've heard in many of your cases, the slogan, fighting terrorists, it's fighting a barrel that has no bottom, a bottomless barrel. Or to fight terrorists, it's like to empty the ocean with a spoon. If you have such people, right away, move them to another job. They're not in the right position. Because I remember in 2002, we had 450 fatalities, mainly civilians, from suicide bombers. 3,000 people got injured in 1 year. We had a waiting list of more than 400 names of suicide bombers. Some people are getting frustrated from it. How do we get 400 names in captivity? Nobody of them is arch-terrorist. I'm not speaking about the generators of terror. I'm not speaking about the commanders. I'm not speaking about those who are manufacturing the bombs. Just the suicide bombers, male, females, at the age of 17, 18. These are not targets for targeted killings. These are people you want to detain them to prevent any suicide bombing by themselves. What are you going to do when you have a true story about a woman from Gaza Strip who got a special permit to go to a hospital inside Israel as a humanitarian step to treat herself by radiation because she suffered cancer. After 2 sessions of radiation, she was recruited by a terror organization, Hamas. She got a belt with explosives, and they told her to detonate herself in the hospital. But they added and said, if the metal detector at the crossing is going to ring, detonate yourself on the spot. So she said, but I'm crossing with some other people from Gaza Strip, Palestinians. They're going to get killed. They said, as long as you are killing Israelis, Never mind if some people from Gaza will get killed. So she asked me why it's supposed to ring at the metal detector. You told me no shrapnel in the bomb. So they answered, you're right. But the sensitivity of the metal detector is unknown to us. And the detonator itself is still made. And if it rings, you have to detonate yourself on the spot. So she said, wait a minute. I broke my arm a few months ago. In the surgery, they put me a piece of metal to strengthen the bone. Is it going to ring? They said, definitely. Thank you for updating us. They took her to a clinic, opened her arm, took out the piece of metal and closed it. You are not going to need it anymore. Thank God we got previous information. And she's one out of 400 names that we saved her life. We saved many Israelis' life. We saved many Palestinians' life. And it's just one case out of hundreds. So frustration is not a characteristic of counterterrorism people. I know that we are always preferring to have terrorists to be killed. I know the slogan, if you can't heal it, kill it. It sounds very good, but it's not effective. You don't have information from a dead man, as far as I know. You do have information from a detained person, a detained terrorist. And killing is the second best, not the first best. The first best is having terrorists in captivity, questioning with them, taking the information, translating it into action items, sending it to the field, foiling other people, plans, laboratories, factories of bombs, and so on and so on. Sometimes it's much easier to target a terrorist. But if you can take him, questioning with them, there's no better way, and I'm sure that many of you will agree with me, there's no better way that I've seen in my life, no better way to get the whole picture about the terror infrastructure better than you can get from a detainee arch-terrorist. And I know the slogan, they don't speak, they are lonely wolves, I heard the name. I haven't met lonely wolves. I've met lonely dogs. And those who speak Arabic, they know the difference between a wolf and a dog. And that's why I think we as countries get rid of the term lonely wolves. The one who drove the truck in Nice and the one who drove the truck in Berlin, he's not a lonely wolf. He's a lonely dog. And I know it's not easy to target such a person or to find him before. But that should be the aim of any counterterrorism apparatus, not to go the easy way, but go the hard way. Try to extend it. Get the person. Learn from him. That's the way you can, right at the beginning, get a full picture. And from a full picture, you'll be able to thwart more and more terrorists, more and more plans, more and more generators of terror, more and more builders of bombs, and so on and so on. In security, you have basically two rings of security. First ring is intelligence. That's supposed to give you the previous information to foil the attack. But unfortunately, we do know, mainly the people who are sitting here, that in 90% of the cases, we are failing to bring the right information on time. So then we have built the second ring, which is the physical ring of security. That's the most expensive ring because it contains people, guards, detectors, metal detectors, sniffers, CT, whatever. We are traveling all over, and we know what does it mean, the second ring in airports, in malls, and any other places, even at the hotel that we are sitting now. The physical ring is deterring, is preemptive, and when you get the attack, it at least minimizes the damage because guards open fire, and even if the terrorists have started to commit the crime, at least you can stop them, block them before they are killing more people or injuring more people. There's only one ring that we have to add in case of passenger aircraft or any other aircraft. Because I know that we are all post 9/11. It's only less than 16 years. But I'm not sure that all lessons from 9/11 were learned. Courageously, if you analyze 9/11, it's 19 terrorists who came aboard 4 passenger aircraft with nothing but bad intentions. There's no way to detect bad intentions online. Even one person to detect bad intentions, it takes more than 1 day. The bomb was supplied by the company, or if you want, by the government. A huge bomb. There's no way to bring down the Trade Center by a bomb dropped from an F-16 combat jet, even if it's a ton of explosives. Each tower was brought down by a carrier, 767, with 50-ton fuels with a steering on it. The dream of any suicide bomber, any terrorist. So the third thing says that if you're not a security man inside the airplane, you're irrelevant. And had we had on those 4 passenger planes in 9/11, on each one, air marshals, no 9/11. No 9/11. I've learned in my life, to be transparent, I was an air marshal 40-something years ago. My trainer was an American guy who put a sign above the entrance to the training center that says a very famous saying that was said by the legendary Samuel Colt. And it says, "Fear no man, no matter size, count on me, I'll equalize." And I trust it. And one of the problems is that terrorists have a very bad habit. They repeat successful terror attacks. Therefore, remember, 9/11 might repeat itself. 9/11 might repeat itself. And those countries who are thinking about saving money, instead of putting guards inside, think twice about it. The US, if I'm not wrong, spent till today trillions of dollars post 9/11 because of 9/11. Only Afghanistan took almost $1.5 trillion, let alone the TSA improvements, etc., etc. Let alone the damage. I'm not speaking about people. I don't know how to evaluate 2,700 killed people. The last point that I want to focus during my talk is about states of terror. Because states of terror, it's the way to empower terror. We all remember Iraq and Libya at the 70s and the 80s, when Carlos the Jackal captured 75 ministers and delegates in Vienna. It was backed, supported, and launched by Iraq under Saddam Hussein at that time. It's interesting, it was on 21st December 75. In 21st December 88, Libya sent her terrorists to put a bomb in the Panam 103 flight that crashed above Lockerbie with 270 killed people. Both countries are not anymore the countries that we used to have them before. But at the beginning of the 80s, we've got a third state of terror, which today is the only or the main state of terror in the west side of Asia, Iran. It runs 5 proxies of terrorists: Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, Houthis in Yemen, and another militia. Not easy to know that you have a state of terror, a regional superpower who is running 5 segments, 5 proxies. Even though that 19 Arab countries declared less than a year ago that Hezbollah is a terror organization. It never happened before. 19 out of 22 Arab countries in our region declared Hezbollah a terror organization. The only 3 who didn't do it: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. The 3 are dominated by Iran today. I think that we as countries, as determined countries, who are committed to fight terrorists, we shouldn't leave any safe haven for terrorists. Terrorists must know that they are in Iran forever. They must know that every crossing within the country, let alone between countries, is a soft point for terrorists. We all know that when you are in front of the state at the passport control, you are by yourself. Even if you go with your wife and family, at the window you are by yourself. If you are a terrorist, you are standing by yourself in front of the state. Because the border control employee, he is with the whole equipment that enables him to decide, you are a terrorist or not. And the best way that I remember that enables you to catch such terrorists in crossings is by sharing information. And the more you share, the more you have. And determined countries will win the war against terrorists. Because I've met here in India yesterday a group of students. I asked them, who was Carlos the Jackal? Nobody knows. They didn't hear about the name. In 5-10 years from now, if you ask students all over the world, who was Osama bin Laden? They will ask you, Osama who? I believe that in 10-15 years, when you'll ask about Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, they'll say, well, Abu Bakr who lives in Baghdad maybe. So don't give up. We do know how to fight terrorists. We do know how to win the war against terrorists. Thank you very much.
I thought after such a intense talk, giving out various issues which emanate from West Asia, plus various personal examples by Avi, we need to give him a good applause once again. And I decided it is better to stand and talk rather than sit on the chair. There is a great learning experience that has come from Israel, where terrorism has affected the very foundations of existence of Israel. And it has been right from the time that Israel came into existence. Various measures were taken, many things were devised, and ultimately they created their own response to meet a particular threat that they faced. They faced many incidents, whether it was the massacre at Munich, whether it was Antibes, whether it was various shootings and other bombings that have taken place inside Israel, and there have been many. And they have come up with their own robust response, learning on the experience that has taken place. I always feel that, like he said, in the end, if we don't learn, if we don't study, if we do not keep a repository of the knowledge that has been gained over a period of time, then we are bound to suffer. We in India have had our own experiences. In fact, we are having one almost every month. Lessons from which can be learned. We have had Mumbai, which is famous, and like he said, terrorist acts do get repeated. Mumbai is one which gives a lot of, one can say, inspiration to many terrorist groups to replicate it in some form or the other anywhere in the world. And therefore, we need to be vigilant. Where we are concerned, we have seen our own suicide bombings. The famous case of our erstwhile Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi is there. We have seen suicide bombings with our peacekeeping force which went into Sri Lanka. And there have been many things that have happened within India. What we need to understand is, how do you tackle it? Because it is the ideology, it is the idea which needs to be tackled in a very robust manner, then only will we be able to find a solution. Otherwise, you will be living from incident to incident, which does not give you the results. When we look at the ideology, he very rightly said, there's a great amount of indoctrination takes place. And what is interesting is that today, the ideology that has been propounded by Daesh or ISIS, it is also affecting people who are extremely well-read, who are academically well-qualified, who come from families which are rich. Now that is something which the world needs to sit down and work out. How do you tackle such people? People coming from well-to-do families, people who have never seen scarcity, people who have had good life, good upbringing, and yet you fall into this ideological trap and you get carried away into something which otherwise is against the humanity. We need to devise our own responses. This ideology has crept not only into the Middle East, where it started off, it has crept all over into many countries. And you do find people who have been attracted by it, men and women, children, who have landed up to fight for a nebulous cause which they feel is justified. So there is a great amount of effort required to de-radicalize people, to work out programs which will keep them onto the normalcy platform so that they do not get into a mode which will take them into terrorism and aiding the terrorists. I subscribe also to the view which Avi had described about the terror networks. Just like the computer networks, just like the social media networks, terror networks gain strength by creating these and linking up in various countries. And it is this linkage which gives it great anonymity and support. And they can be anywhere. any country, anywhere in the world. They devise their own languages and methods of communication. They assist each other, and they're not really concerned with the country in which they are living or how they've benefited from that country, because they work as part of network which has now become global. So we need to look at this threat in a much more deeper manner than what we have done before. Otherwise, like he said, after some time people will say Osama was a person who came with a camel which was laden with goods. It will happen because we are not really keeping a tag of things that happen. One of the things is that it requires great amount of participation of the people to assist in this fight against terrorism. What it means is that people need to ensure that they are vigilant. People need to ensure that they know what is happening. People need to keep their eyes and ears open so that they become extended arms of the response teams that the nation makes. And people need to assist in the responses that the governments devise. Without this people's support, you will find that the fight will always remain one-handed. Both the hands will never come together. And this is a lesson, I think, which we can take with us as to what can be done. What you need as part of response is a very intelligent, very robust, multi-layered intelligence system which works 24/7 for 365 days a year. Please remember, for people who want to ensure that no terrorist attacks takes place, you have to work 365 days. You have to be vigilant all 365 days. You have to be vigilant all 24 hours a day. Terrorist is just looking for 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute to do the job. You give him that one chance and he has achieved the aim. And therefore, great amount of effort and resources are required to create a system like this. Then you need to have a follow-up. You need to have tie-ups with other countries, other nations, their intelligence systems, so that you can also create your own networks, just like the terrorists have done, to gain their own things. You need to create a great amount of awareness in the public. You need to ensure that they come in handy when something goes wrong. And lastly, you need to have well-trained professional response teams which are able to tackle an attack that takes place, or ideally which are able to ensure that the attack never takes place. After attack has taken place, damage has been done. So we need to look at these things very, very seriously. Technology comes in handy, but technology has to be supported by people, and a great amount of effort has to be put in. Avi would know that they have an organization of people who carry out data mining almost throughout the day, sitting in a place in New York, looking at anything which can be classified as hate against Israel or the Jews. And that starts giving them lead. It tells them, the message passes on fast. People start analyzing it. And there are times when they are able to nip the bud in place. They are able to find the thing before it happens. We need to do that. We have been affected very seriously by many terrorist attacks of various types, and it is for us to draw lessons not only from what Avi said about his experience in the Middle East, but also from all countries who have had this situation or this threat and have dealt with it, because this is a threat in which you cannot go to sleep. It can do tremendous damage. So far as India is concerned, our stand has been very clear. There are no good or bad terrorists. There are only terrorists. And that is why we always say that terrorists have got no caste, religion, color. They are just terrorists. They are only driven by one philosophy: how to cause damage, how to create panic, how to get publicity for themselves, and to attain what their ideology says. We have proposed the CCIT, the Comprehensive Act for Tackling Terrorism, in the UN. We are hopeful that people will support us. Some have, some are still dithering. I sincerely hope that this dithering stops, because this is a threat which is real, which is current, and which is going to affect all the countries in the world. With this, I once again thank Avi and all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Ram Madhavji wrote in one of his columns in the Indian Express that a terrorist has to be lucky only once, while the security forces have to be lucky every day. So that's a very thoughtful remark and corroborates whatever was discussed right now. May I request the Honorable Chair to present a token of appreciation and memento to the keynote speaker of the day. May I request Shri Vinod Bavri ji to kindly felicitate the Honorable Chair. With this, we come to an end for this session. We shall be beginning with the next session, the fourth plenary, shortly. Please remain seated. The next plenary is on terrorism in West Asia, and I would request the Honorable Director of the India Foundation, Captain Alok Bansal ji, to kindly conduct the proceedings. We're just waiting for the minister. We shall begin soon once he leaves the premises. May I please invite the Director of India Foundation, Shri Binod Bawari ji, to kindly conduct the proceedings.
It's again my pleasure to call General Syed Hassani to chair this session. I'm seeing him somewhere. Yeah, please, sir. Can I ask Daniel to please come to the stage? He's an old friend of ours. We've been seeing him for a number of years. Can I ask Mr. Ilan Burman to please come to the stage? And can I ask Mr. Vladimir SFC from Russia to come to the stage? So we have somebody from America and somebody from Russia. They don't fight with each other now, so it's all right. Can I hand over the proceedings to General Sahab to take over?
Good evening and Jai Hind. Surprising that last session of the day at 7:15, 7:30 in the evening, we still find 75% of the seats are still full. That's some achievement. And obviously it is for the fact that perhaps the most interesting session is actually about to unfold now. West Asia, well, South Asia will always remain very, very topical for us, very interesting for us. And South Asia includes portions leading up to Central Asia and places like that. But West Asia is actually the core center, from where actually, if you really look at it, everything starts from there. And I'm not going to stay between you and the excellent panelists that we have here lined up for you. But I'll take a minute and maybe minute and a half to just outline to you that maybe you need a few reminders about West Asia. Between the date 1928 and the year 2014, a hell of a lot has happened. 1928 was the day when Hassan al-Banna, the year when Hassan al-Banna gave name or raised the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And Muslim Brotherhood spread into the entire West Asia, all the Islamic countries of West Asia. 84 years later, Muslim Brotherhood came to power in 2012. If you remember, in Egypt, but lost power within 1 year. 84 years of waiting, you lose power after 1 year. And up to 2014, when ultimately the so-called new caliph, al-Baghdadi, came to power, established his own power, and gave birth to Daesh, or the ISIS. A lot has happened in the middle. The most eventful milestones or landmarks which were there were obviously, after that, the partition or the creation of the State of Israel, the wars that were fought between Israel and the Arabs, 3 wars, 1948, 56, 67, 73, actually 4 wars. the raising of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1964. That's the Arafat's organization, which is supposedly the first terrorist group in West Asia, sometimes very debatable, but a lot of people call that way. Then the empowerment of the energy world in 1973. And thereafter Camp David, in which Egypt stepped out of the whole thing. And conventional war between the Arabs and the Israelis came to an end. And then you came into the 80s, and you found, before that, the most tumultuous event of the second half of the 20th century. That was 1979, and that was the revolution in Iran, which gave rise, triggered the Shia-Sunni conflict, the competition within the Islamic world. And thereafter we come to 1990, the first Gulf War, the period of the 90s, the rising of Osama bin Laden and his organization, the Al-Qaeda. Thereafter, you come to 9/11, which of course is not West Asian event, but closely related to West Asia. And finally, you come through the Lebanon War of 2006, and lined up finally at the Arab Spring, the failed Arab Spring, and lining up finally at 2014, when al-Baghdadi came into being. And today you find that the theme which you are primarily looking at is, what is the future? What is going to happen in the displacement of al-Baghdadi and the Daesh, ISIS? Is Al-Qaeda going to come back into resurgence, into power? The son of Osama bin Laden is supposedly back into leadership of the Al-Qaeda. What's going to happen with that? So lots and lots of things which are happening in the Middle East. Everything radiates from there. What's happening in Bangladesh, what's happening in Singapore, what's happening in Afghanistan, Pakistan, parts of India, everything radiates from here, from West Asia. And we've got three great experts lined up for you. The fourth from Iran, unfortunately, is not here, but we'll start. There are no outline themes for each of them. They are free absolutely to speak on what they wish to speak. And therefore, we'll start with our oldest friend here, Daniel Pipes. And it's been a pleasure. This is the third time that I am with him here, perhaps on a panel. And it's been a pleasure to welcome him to make the first presentation. And to give maximum time to questions and interaction at the end, we'll try and restrict the speakers to about 15 minutes to a maximum of maybe 20. Thank you.
Thank you, General Hasnain, for the encouraging introduction that we are the most interesting panel of the conference, and let's make that happen. I'd like to thank the India Foundation for the kind invitation to join you. And my comments will be more or less an elaboration on what the General said, which is that West Asia is very important when it comes to terrorism and South Asia. West Asia has been a center for terrorism in its own right, and it's been an exporter to other regions, notably this one. And as the General said, it pretty much began with the Palestinians, who, starting in the 1960s, saw that they could not take on the Israelis in conventional warfare. They lacked planes, tanks, and ships. And so they instead targeted civilians primarily. And their goals were in part to achieve specific policy goals, for example, to have some prisoners released or some other specific item. Or it was to demoralize the Israelis or to hit and harm their economy. In the late 1980s, in the early 1980s, the Islamists picked up on this tactic. And as Mr. Dichter pointed out earlier, they shifted from the earlier forms of terrorism to suicide bombing, in which case there were no more policies. They weren't asking for anything. They just simply attacked. Now, the most important example of transfer from West Asia to South Asia was Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian who was key in the founding of Al-Qaeda and was also key in the founding of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Most recently, just a week ago, the attacker in Lucknow was an ISIS follower, and therefore also someone influenced by West Asia. So whether it be in the 1980s or last week, you see the imprint of West Asian impact on violence in South Asia. So my question to you is, will this influence continue, or is this something that is only in the past? And to understand the influence, I think you need to look at the sources. And for me, the issue primarily today is Islamism. By Islamism, I mean a certain kind of understanding of Islam, namely the application of Islamic law in its severity and its entirety. Namely, the idea that the Muslim world will be strong if Muslims return to full application of the Sharia. A perfect example would be ISIS or Daesh in Syria and Iraq, or Boko Haram in Nigeria, or Shabab in Somalia, or the Taliban in Afghanistan, or other groups around the world. Absolute dedication to the application of Islamic law. Now, this historically is a West Asian phenomenon, and I might note that throughout the centuries, it has been West Asia that has exported ideas to other parts of the Muslim world. Islam itself comes from West Asia, Sufism comes from West Asia, and so does Islamism. Its origins, the origins of the Islamist surge, have a lot to do with a sense that the Muslim world has not kept up with modernity. And in the last 2 centuries, as modernity has come and impacted the entire world, we see 3 responses to it. In the first era, from about 1800 to 1920, the majority Muslim response was to emulate Britain and France, the liberal Western states. In the second era, about 1920 to 1980, the majority response was to emulate the illiberal Western states, namely Germany and Russia. And finally, since about 1980, the majority response has been not to emulate the West, but to go back into Islamic tradition and emulate the Muslims of a millennium ago. For this reason, I would dispute an earlier speaker, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir this morning, Mahbooba Mufti, who said that good governance shrinks the space for terrorism. I don't think so. If you look at North Korea, Zimbabwe, or Haiti, you see 3 examples of terrible governance, atrocious governance, each in its own way. And yet one does not find terrorism coming out of these 3 countries. Contrarily, if you look at France, Canada, and Australia, you see 3 countries which do have governance and which are suffering indeed from terrorism. I don't see a correlation either between governance or personal standing and jihadi violence. Rather, what I see is attraction to an idea. This is a powerful idea. I would go further and argue to you that just as communism was a radical utopian ideology that had great attraction to many people, and particularly educated ones, and so did fascism. Now it is Islamism's turn, and Islamism has great attraction to those who have the dynamism and creativity to think about the world, and particularly to think about the Ummah, the Muslim community. And they're saying the way to strengthen the Ummah is by going back and applying Islamic law. So it's not about governance, it's not about personal status, being rich or poor, employed or unemployed, educated or not. It's about attraction to this idea. Jihadi violence results from this deep sense that the Muslim community, the Ummah, has not done well in the modern era. But it results also from other factors in West Asia. West Asia was renowned in decades past for its dictators, figures like the Shah of Iran, Saddam Hussein of Iraq, Hafez al-Assad of Syria, and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. Murderous regimes certainly still exist in the region, but far more notable is the fact that anarchy, fawda, anarchy has spread. Going from west to east, Mali is enlarged, the north of Mali is essentially without rule. Libya itself is has two main forces and they fight across the country. In Somalia, since 1991, there has been no effective government. In the Sinai Peninsula, the Egyptian government has lost control. In Yemen, there is a major civil war and there's no central power. In Lebanon, there's been no central power, arguably since the late 60s. In the Palestinian Authority, there is anarchy. The Palestinian Authority itself does not rule. In Syria, of course, there's a tremendous civil war between four main factions: the government, ISIS, other Sunni groups, and the Kurds. In Iraq, substantial parts of the country are anarchic. Afghanistan has never, since the 1973 overthrow of the regime, had a government that's in control of the country. Pakistan sees tribal zones, particularly in the northern area, not under full government control. As a result of this pattern of anarchy that goes across West Asia and down to South Asia, national arsenals previously guarded by state institutions are now open to being plundered. And we can see how arms have spread. For example, Libyan weapons have spread to West Africa and to Syria. In Syria, ISIS has arms from the Americans via the Iraqi army, and from Russia via the Syrian army. Further, this anarchy means there are no border controls. Mr. Dichter pointed to the fact that if you're standing in front of a border patrol agent, a border agent, you are vulnerable. But, for example, the Syrian-Iraqi border doesn't exist anymore. And in many other cases, the border controls have essentially decayed. There's free movement for jihadis and their weapons. Refugees, the enormous movement of refugees, especially from Syria, means that jihadis can intersperse themselves among the larger populations. As a result, West Asia is the core of Islamist violence. There is no reason to think that it will diminish anytime soon. If anything, it is increasing. There are now 4 countries in which the Iranian regime is fighting others: in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, and Iraq. There are troubles in Turkey with the regime fighting the Kurds. Wherever you look, the government control is not quite what it used to be in the Muslim Middle East. We on the outside cannot fix this. It is up to the Middle Easterners themselves. The attempts to do so, for example, in Afghanistan and Iraq by American-led coalitions failed. Those trillions of dollars, those thousands of lives, did not achieve their goals. Change must come from within, and I'm happy to report there are some positive signs. There are many in the Muslim Middle East who have concluded that things aren't working, things need to be rethought. There are some countries where things are going well. For example, the United Emirates. I just came to India on Sunday from Oman. Things are going well there. There's not a single jihadi so far in Oman. There are places where things are going right. There are lessons to be learned from the countries which are successful. But this is not going to be something that occurs quickly. It's not going to occur painlessly. West Asia is going to suffer from this wave of jihadi violence, of terrorism, for some time to come. And those of us who live outside the region must protect ourselves from this violence and the bad ideas that inspire it coming out of West Asia. Whether we be in North America, as I am, or in South Asia, as most of you are, it's important to insulate ourselves from the dangers, whether it be the weapons, the individuals, or most importantly, the ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you especially for being so disciplined, because I think you took just 12 minutes. That's about all. Perhaps we can give you more time in the question and answers later. But obviously, Dr. Pipes made some very, very relevant points, counterpoints, may I say, away from the conventional understanding of terror. And I think the most important point which he really made, something for us to look at, is this aspect of governance which he spoke about, which in the morning was an entire theme, as you saw. And we all in India normally give governance a lot of importance as far as triggering of terrorism and the control of terrorism as a part of the counter-terrorism campaign is concerned. And you saw Dr. Pipes has completely turned that theory on his head and said actually governance has really nothing much to do with it. It is ideology. And in this case, it's Islamism, which has much more to do with that. Perhaps someone will question him on that. Now I'll call upon Dr. Vladimir Erseev from Russia, the Deputy Director of the Institute of Commonwealth of Independent States, and he's made it known already that he's going to address something which has probably not been addressed enough in this conference so far. He's going to look at Central Asia, although we are talking on West Asia, but he's going to look at the connection between West Asia and Central Asia. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear friends, I will speak about Central Asia. Central Asia includes 5 countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. For Russia, it is very important regional because we have a very huge mutual border. For example, border between Russia and Kazakhstan more than border between Russia and China. But for us, it is not only one reason, that mutual border. We very serious united in economy, culture, and other links. And maybe you know, on this Russian territory works from 2, maybe 5 million people from Central Asia, like migrant labor forces. It is 10% of population of Central Asia. No, majority from Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. I'm sure that Russia and India may cooperate to counter terrorism in Central Asia, and we have a lot of basis for them. You know that in the near future, India will be full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And it is important because we may better cooperate to counter terrorism in Central Asia. Now, situation in Central Asia, if speaking about counter-terrorism, it is complicated. And for them, it is a lot of reasons. Some of them it is factors inside, but sometimes outside influence on the situation in Central Asia. And if you're looking about foreign factors, no, one of them, it is important that, you know, part of people from Central Asia engagement in military conflict. No, for example, on Russian estimates, about 10,000 people from Central Asia and others countries from post-Soviet territory engagement for activities on the side of Islamic State. It is not small, but we think that maybe 8,000 may return. What to do if these radicals go to Central Asia? Maybe serious problem, and my country and other countries from this collective security treaty organization try to deterrence and create obstacles that these people cannot return to Central Asia. It is necessary, if looking for what is countries situated near to Central Asia, Afghanistan, we have estimates too. From Central Asia, 4,000 rebels take part in these activities on the side of radicals. So it is a serious problem for us, serious problem for Central Asian countries. But it is a bad idea to think that only foreign factors influence on situation in Central Asia. I'm sure that majority problem not in the foreign countries, majority problem inside of the country, because today speaking a lot about corruption, about social economic problem and others. For Central Asia, it's very, very typical, but not only, unfortunately. In the near future, for us, it is necessary to wait authorities transit. And it will be at first in Kazakhstan and after then in Tajikistan. During time of authorities transit, when changing this leader of this country, it will be maybe using radicals, using terrorism for changing situation in this country. For us, it is very important Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan is open country, more open than others from Central Asia. It is easy to influence. For a long time, people from Kazakhstan think that we cannot to be engaged for terror. But from 2011, we saw that sometimes terrorist acts. For example, last year, 2016, we have at first, we saw in summer last year. At first is October in the west part of Kazakh Republic, and another in Almaty, in the south part. In my personal view, this process will be continued, not stopping. It is not only accident. It will be continue. It is necessary to wait that terrorist activities in Kazakhstan will be continued. We have estimates how much people may be engagement like terrorism in Kazakh Republic. If you're looking for official only 1,000. 1,000 not small, because if you look in what maybe, for example, sleeping cell maybe only 50 people, but it is enough to catch small city. And October maybe same try to catch if will be opportunities, but of course we may people from Kazakh Republic may solve the problem, but problem may be to exist in the future. But if you look in what is really basis for terrorism in Kazakh Republic, we have estimates about Salafi. Salafi on territory of Kazakh Republic, 15,000. 15,000 is basis for terrorism. So if you compare this situation in Kyrgyzstan, in Kyrgyzstan, estimates 2,000 people is ready to be terrorism. So it is necessary to speak in maybe about 10,000. 10,000 to be engagement. But it is only my estimates. Maybe we have more, because some people from Kazakh Republic think this people is ready to be engagement for radicals. Maybe 40, maybe 50,000. So it is a huge basis. It is necessary to decrease this amount. And if you're looking for another countries, majority problem in Tajik Republic, because Tajikistan has a huge border with Afghanistan, 1,344 kilometers. It is a very different situation with Uzbekistan, only 100. Uzbekistan have very huge army. Uzbekistan may close border, not problem. But what to do if radicals go through Tajikistan and go to Uzbekistan through Tajik Republic? It is a serious problem. And Tajikistan haven't huge army. No, for understand me, Russian military base in Tajik Republic have same amount military people like Tajik army. No, it is, but if looking at military potential, of course, Russian army have more potential several times than Tajik army at whole. Of course, Russia is ready to help in Tajik Republic, but what to do if will be problem inside of the country? You know that in my personal view, authorities of Tajik Republic did a lot of mistake if looking what to do against people for Muslims. And so for Russia will be important to deterrence radicals on the border with Afghanistan. But unfortunately, two countries cannot to be a member on this collective security treaty organization. It is Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Of course, Russia and Uzbekistan have a mutual agreement, and Russia may be helping for Uzbekistan. But what to do with Turkmenistan? In my personal view, situation there became worse. Now, 80% of army deploy on the border and try to the border with Afghanistan. This army is not ready to deter radicals if will be huge radicals. So situation is difficult, but I'm sure if we made to cooperate, if we made to using the potential of other countries from Shanghai Cooperation Organization, if we will cooperate with India, we may to find additional opportunities for deterrence terror, because it is important for not only for my country, not only for Central Asia, it is necessary for regional security. And for Russian estimates, radicals may organize attack on the border. This not more than 1,000, maybe 2,000 radicals. It is so. It is necessary to be ready to deterrence attack of these radicals from Central Asia, and I hope we may do deterrence. And no, maybe my finish time. No, no. And I want to speak a few about Islamic State. You know that this organization stay in Afghanistan. In Russian estimates, amount of rebels in this organization from 7 to 8,000. But it is for Turkmenistan's problem that Turkmenistan have agreement with Taliban. But what to do with Islamic State? If people from Islamic State want to be try to go to Turkmenistan, but now this zone near Central Asia, it is north part of Afghanistan, situation became worse, because a lot of radicals go there, and exist a part of Islamic State, but what will be situation in future? In my personal view, it is necessary to organize mutual defense. It is necessary to organize cooperate not only in security. In my personal view, is defense. It is necessary to cooperate defense, because it is serious problem, and I hope that India will be helping, and we made to find this mutual decision in this regional, because for organize others project in this regional, it is necessary to have security. Now, for example, you know project TAPI, maybe this project important for India too, but for realize this project, it is necessary to having problem with security. And in conclusion, I want to speak that Russia have a very good experience to deterrence, to counter terrorism, and Russia is ready to cooperate with other countries, with India, with China, with other countries, and I hope that we may to deterrence terrorism if we will be together. I hope that we may do together, because terrorism is not problem for Russian Federation. It's not problem for Central. It's a problem for India, for other countries. It is necessary to be together. It is necessary prepared for mutual war with terror. I hope we may to deterrence terrorism in this regional. I finish.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vladimir. That was excellent, very disciplined again, as I said, 15 minutes. But you really gave an expose to an area which we seldom speak about. And you spoke about Kazakhstan at length, the potential of problems there. You spoke about the Salafi presence there. You spoke about Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and most importantly about Turkmenistan, the country which supposedly has the weakest governance, but the richest resources in terms of gas. And the importance of TAPI to India is no doubt was underscored by you. I may like to recall, just for the audience, that one single visit to Moscow by me, maybe a year and a half ago, put me into that light of thinking, where I found that the world's information was all available in all the think tanks of Moscow. And that's where we first got the indications of the Russian interests in West Asia, particularly in Syria. And those were the indicators at that time. This is sometime in 2015, when we realized that Russia was getting worried about the possibility that if Daesh is squeezed out of West Asia, where will it go? Will it go to Africa, Somalia, or to Nigeria, or to Mali, or will it go to the Sinai? Or would it prefer to come to a resource-rich area where there's potential of tremendous amount of narcotics, drugs traffic, money is available, and ISIS, after having been spoiled by the riches of the Mosul refinery, was definitely looking at much more money coming into its treasuries. So this is something which was opened, my eyes were opened to it by the Russian think tanks in Moscow, and I'm glad that this is exactly what Dr. Vladimir has also spoken about out here. I'm sure you will have much to question him on this. May I call upon Dr. Ilan Berman now, who's the Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council, and he's going to speak to us actually on global war on terror, West Asia and global war on terror.
Well, thank you very much. And let me start by sort of setting my stopwatch so I don't go over time. Let me begin by thanking Ram Madhav and the India Foundation for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's really a privilege to be here with all of you. My institution, the American Foreign Policy Council, is in Washington. We're actually on Capitol Hill, the place where debates never really end. They just go around and around. And so it's very nice to come out and talk to a different audience and perhaps hear some new thoughts. And I've certainly heard a great deal today. And I actually thought this was a great way to sort of to finish out the panel, because from the general we heard about the past and the sort of the evolution of instability in West Asia, in the greater Middle East. From Dr. Pipes and Dr. Yeviseyev, we heard about the present. Sort of what the situation is now and sort of what needs to be done in the near future. So I thought in my time I would talk about the future and what we can expect from the region and how we need to respond. I want to start where Dr. Yeviseyev finished, which is with regard to the Islamic State. Over the last 2 years, since early 2014, the rapid takeover of parts of Iraq and subsequently of parts of Syria by that group, the group that's popularly known as the Islamic State or ISIS or Daesh or however you classify it, has captivated global attention. And it has captured attention, and its unbridled brutality has held international attention. And so the media today is filled with images and narratives of the sort of the brutality and the hostility of life under the caliphate. And as a result, very logically, the Islamic State has become the near singular focus of international counterterrorism policy, certainly of the Western response to contemporary terrorism. But I would posit that the struggle against ISIS is only one part of a much larger contest. And something that's going to require sustained attention and sustained coordination over the next several years. So I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about what that field is going to look like. And I would argue that there are really 5 trends that we need to focus on in the next several years. The first does indeed have to do with the Islamic State or the potential of the Islamic State in decline. So, by way of reference, at the height of its power in late 2014 and early 2015, the territory of the Islamic State covered 81,000 square miles, which is roughly equivalent to the size of the United Kingdom. And it held sway over a population of 8 million civilians, roughly analogous to the population of the country of Switzerland. During that time, ISIS was estimated by U.S. intelligence sources and private intelligence institutions to be generating revenue of approximately $1 billion annually, making it the richest, most well-funded and well-resourced threat group in modern history. Today, the fortunes of the Islamic State have declined considerably. As a result of coalition pressure, as a result of hard power, direct action, and soft power pressure on the Islamic State's resources, the group's reach has been eroded significantly. As of this past summer, the British intelligence consultant, the IHS Janes, estimated that ISIS had lost a quarter of its total territory, roughly the size of Ireland, and its finances had declined by roughly half as well. This is attributable certainly to the bright spots in Western counterterrorism policy, in particular what U.S. government officials call the Line 5 effort, which is the effort to counter ISIS financing through targeting its various income streams. These setbacks on the part of the Islamic State have forced changes to the group's modus operandi, and it's forced it to implement cost-cutting measures, such as slashing the salaries of its foreign fighters. But is the Islamic State truly on the ropes? The conventional wisdom in Washington is that ISIS is now in terminal decline, just like we said al-Qaeda was several years ago. I would make the argument that the answer is no. Despite all of these setbacks that I mentioned, the Islamic State is a resilient actor, and it's still a capable actor, which has a diverse funding stream, right? Everything from black market energy trade to, most importantly, taxation of the citizens under its control. These elements continue to challenge the ability of the United States and its allies to neutralize them. In addition, the Islamic State still has global reach. The group has succeeded in fielding at least 6 what it calls armies, functioning armies, in Libya, in Egypt, in Nigeria, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, and in Afghanistan, as well as multiple independent cells that are inspired by its ideologies. And what this means is that it's still possible to envision, no matter how successful the coalition is in the near future, it's still possible to envision a caliphate, maybe a smaller caliphate, a caliphate that is geographically smaller, but territorially and economically sustainable. In other words, we can envision a future in which the Islamic State is degraded, but it's not totally depleted. And we need to contend with that future. The second trend that we need to focus on is the groups that have tethered themselves to the Islamic State itself. Today, no fewer than 34 separate radical groups from virtually every region in the world have made common cause with ISIS or have pledged bayat, pledged allegiance to its emir, to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And these factions are going to inevitably be affected by the current path of decline that is being seen on the part of the Islamic State. But these groups are not going to go away as a result, and I think it's facile to think so. In virtually all of the cases, except for the groups that have sprung up in Syria themselves, these organizations predate the creation of the Islamic State and have autonomous personnel, infrastructure, and operational capabilities. A great example in this regard is Boko Haram in Nigeria, which has split over the question of allegiance to the Islamic State, but both halves of the larger Boko Haram whole maintain autonomous capability and will continue to be a threat, both nationally in Nigeria, but also regionally in Central Africa. And so as a result, the decline of the Islamic State could usher in the era of diffuse, localized jihad, where its former partners, the former partners of the Islamic State, in the absence of a coherent central guidance, begin to seek to promote their own radical visions for their respective regions. And this is something that we, as allies, need to be prepared for. The third trend that we need to account for is the future of al-Qaeda. We all know that the Islamic State is a spawn of al-Qaeda. It is a product of al-Qaeda and an evolution of al-Qaeda ideology. And we also know that over the past 3 years, the two groups have become bitter rivals, and they've competed for what we call hearts and minds throughout the Islamic world with regard to affiliation and allegiance. In that contest, the Islamic State has won, at least so far. But what is less well understood, I would argue, is what has happened to Al-Qaeda as a result. Because you've seen a pretty significant evolution of Al-Qaeda's own ideology and modus operandi in response to the innovations that the Islamic State has made. And as a result, today, the organization holds more territory than at any time in its history up until now. From Yemen to Syria to Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda has become entrenched on large parcels of territory, exploiting empty political space in conflict zones, and exploiting the local reaction, the local aversion to the excesses of the Islamic State to promote itself as a, would you believe, moderate alternative. And it's succeeding. This long-term strategy, moreover, it has benefited tremendously from a lack of sustained attention, at least on the part of the United States. We in the United States have been preoccupied with the Islamic State, or what some of us call the shiny object. The object that is capturing all of the media attention and sucking up all of the oxygen in the room. And because we have allowed Al-Qaeda to continue to flourish in the shadows on these peripheral regions where it is now making its base. And by doing so, the bin Laden network has laid the groundwork for a long-term strategic presence as a global actor. The fourth trend that we need to focus on is a new generation of jihadists. Over the last half-decade, the struggle between the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria and its political opponents has steadily transformed from a local conflict, from a civil war, into a global jihad. Thanks to the influx of tens of thousands of foreign extremists, you could say that Syria has become the new Afghanistan. It's become a crucible for today's terrorists and an indoctrination and breeding ground for tomorrow's terrorists. And the analogy to Afghanistan is, I think, very instructive. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 touched off what we know as the first jihad, the mass mobilization of radicals throughout the Muslim world. And over the years that followed, thousands made their way to Southwest Asia to wage jihad against the Soviet Union. All told, scholars estimate that as many as 20,000 foreign fighters joined the ranks of the Afghan Mujahideen in the decade between 1979 and the end of the war in 1989. Over time, this network became a true network. It became battle-hardened, it became field-tested, and it became closely coordinated. And once the Afghan jihad ended, some of these alumni sought out other conflicts, such as Chechnya or in the Balkans, and others returned to their own home countries to carry out subversion at a local level. But today, the foreign fighter problem that is being incubated in Syria has the potential to be much worse than what we saw during the 1990s. This is because since its rise to prominence in Iraq and Syria in 2014, 2015, the Islamic State is estimated to have attracted on the order of 31,000 foreign fighters. Right? So put another way, the Islamic State in 2.5, 3 years has marshaled more than 1.5 times as many foreign fighters as joined the Afghan jihad throughout the entire decade of the 1980s. And as the Syrian civil war winds down, if and when it does, because all wars must inevitably end, we can expect to see a massive outflow of Syrian alumni in ways that are going to destabilize the regions where they come from, including places like Central Asia, places like Russia, and also in South Asia and Southeast Asia as well. The fifth trend is one that is talked about, I think, far less, but it bears noting, and that is the threat that's posed by a reinvigorated Iranian threat network. The contemporary focus on ISIS, at least in the United States, has diverted attention from the growing potential for Shiite religious radicalism, a phenomenon which is causally linked to the expanding capabilities and strategic ambitions of the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a result of the nuclear deal signed between Iran and the P5+1 powers last summer, the Iranian regime has received what amounts to an enormous economic windfall, one that encompasses upwards of $100 billion in direct economic relief, as well as billions upon billions of dollars of defense-related and energy-related post-sanctions trade. And this has set the Iranian economy, which was previously rickety, on a path of, well, still modest, but certainly growth. And as Iran's economy has stabilized, its strategic ambitions have expanded. Over the last year and a half, among many other initiatives, the Iranian regime has deepened its military footprint in Syria in support of the Assad regime. It has redoubled its investment in Shiite militias operating in Iraq. It has provided extensive military assistance to Yemen's Houthi rebels and empowered their political rise. And the list goes on. The cumulative effect of this is that you could today say that Iran is in control of 4 separate Arab capitals in the greater Middle East. It is in control of Beirut, Lebanon. It is in control of Damascus, Syria. It is in control of Baghdad, Iraq. And it's in control of Sana'a, Yemen. This has 2, I would argue, important implications for the United States and its coalition allies. First is that we are very likely to see a surge in capabilities of radical groups that are supported and funded by Iran. Even before the lifting of multilateral sanctions as a result of the nuclear deal, Iran was estimated by the U.S. government to be spending between $3.5 billion and $16 billion a year on the support of groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Given the importance of these proxies in Iran's strategic foreign policy, as force multipliers, as asymmetric allies, we can expect these contributions to grow as Iran's economy becomes more and more solvent. The second trend line, and I think it's a very ominous one, is Iran's complicity in a secondary and less known foreign fighter flow. We talked about a lot over the last day about foreign fighter flows into the Iraq-Syria battle space in support of the Islamic State. We haven't yet talked about the idea that Iran is supporting and directing a secondary Shiite fighter flow, state-directed, very narrowly tailored, but implicating radicals from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Iraq, from Yemen, and flowing into Syria in support of the Assad regime to fight against the Islamic State as well as other forces there. This trend line is significant precisely because it is state-directed. If the worry about foreign fighters flowing out of Syria and Iraq after the war is that it will be an undirected stream and these fighters will go wherever they choose, there is worry that Iran, which has weaponized foreign fighters in its fight in Syria, could weaponize them again in the future against other countries. So where does that leave us? For the United States and its allies, the contemporary focus on ISIS is logical because of political promises, because of the new administration in Washington, which has hung its strategic hat on the idea that we will erode and degrade the Islamic State. But our counterterrorism policy over the long term has to be broader. It has to be more strategic. And it must anticipate the future complexion of the battlefield, as I've laid it out. Right? There's a difference between rhetoric and political rhetoric and reality and the allocation of resources. In this process, I think we're going to see over the next year a very significant evolution in official Washington's thinking. But I hope, sincerely, that what we also see is far greater investment in international cooperation, in combating the future complexion of the battlefield, and also in beginning a serious process in the discussion of what Dr. Pipes talked about, which is the centrality of ideology to the spread, to the proliferation of these trends. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Berman, thank you very much. And I wasn't wrong when I started the session by telling you that actually this would be the most interesting session. Because you just heard I mean, the kind of information which has been made available to you in this last talk particularly, and he's drawn out the entire linkages all over West Asia, from Syria to Yemen, and ending up with the specter of Shia domination of possible Shia terrorism sponsored from Iran. Nothing can be ruled out. So this has given us a completely different vista of thinking, actually, towards this entire problem. He's also dwelt upon the future of the Al-Qaeda, because the world has taken its eyes off the Al-Qaeda. Everyone is looking at Daesh, the future of Daesh, displacement of Daesh, and no one is looking at the Al-Qaeda and its resurgence, which is taking place in various areas around the world. And the last of them, I think, the very, very important point which he made, that it's not necessary for Daesh to exist in this imagined world of a caliphate by being only concentrated in the territory of northern Iraq and Syria. It can very well exist in a networked world by being spread out in much dispersed areas and possibly continue to function as a caliphate. These are some of the points, very, 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 very focused issues which were brought about in this last presentation. We have with us about 25 minutes available for us to bring in questions. I can see the first hand which has gone up there, the second hand behind you. Sir, the first hand.
Question to American speaker, to Dr. Pipes. You rightly mentioned that there is no practical border between Iraq and Syria, in a sense that semi-state of ISIS in Syria and semi-state of ISIS in Iraq, they do cooperate and interact, while those who fight with them don't cooperate enough. I mean that until October and November of last year, Russian operation in Syria against ISIS and American operation in Iraq were more or less interfaced. It was mil-to-mil cooperation, but then it was broken at the late stage of Obama administration. And understanding all the domestic situation in the US, that new administration cannot immediately reinstall too much cooperation with Russia because of criticism from Democrats. Still, my question is, strategically, do you think that we can leave it as is, two parallel, unconnected operations against ISIS? Or shall we, using the analogy of AfPak, create a kind of Syr-Rak, strategic area which would be covering both Syria and Iraq, where both USA, Russia, NATO, Turkey, Israel would cooperate against ISIS? Thanks.
I think you can respond immediately, Dr. Pipes, and I would request you to also summarize the question, because it was a very long, drawn-out backdrop to it.
The summary would be, would it be possible for all the states that are against ISIS, and ISIS has made many, many enemies, namely Russia, Iran, Israel, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Britain, would it be possible for them to cooperate as opposed to at present where they do not cooperate? Well, certainly key to this is the American administration. As you're probably all aware, we have a new president who is quite unpredictable. And while I feel confident in predicting the Middle East, I do not feel confident about predicting my own government. I have no idea what's coming. And anybody who tells you otherwise is wrong. We don't know. So possibly, yes, certainly President Trump has made warm gestures towards the Russian government, but at the same time, as you're well aware, things are looking quite dark at present. So who knows where this is going? It could and it might not. May I take the opportunity on the subject of ISIS to disagree with Mr. Berman, who has said conventional wisdom holds that ISIS is doomed. May I support conventional wisdom? Conventional wisdom, of course, is always wrong, but maybe this time it will be correct. ISIS is in terminal illness. It is inconceivable. Just think of all those states that are against it. It is inconceivable that it will survive. What will survive will be the affiliated groups, such as in Nigeria and Somalia. What will survive will be this absolutely pure notion of the Islamic State. And perhaps most importantly, what ISIS created and will survive is the notion of the caliphate. I'm a historian of the Middle East, and I can tell you that the last executive caliph, the last caliph who actually made decisions that people listened to, was in the 940s, not 1940s, 940s, over 1,000 years ago. And so it was quite a shock in June of 2014 to have a caliph in charge of an area as large as Great Britain. That will die, I believe, but the idea will go on. I can imagine His Eminence, the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, deciding that he is the caliph. After all, the caliphate was nominally in Turkey for 5 centuries. I can imagine the servant of the 2 holy places, the king of Saudi Arabia, deciding he is the caliph. After all, he rules in Mecca. I can imagine that the spiritual guide of the Iranian Islamic Republic will decide that he is the caliph, and it could be others too. So watch out for this very, very dangerous notion of a caliphate spreading.
Thank you. There was a question. There was a hand here somewhere, second hand, which had gone up. Yeah. Then we'll come back. Second hand there. Yeah. No, the one there, behind you. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, General Hussain. My question, actually, I have 2 questions. First one quite echoes what the comment General just made. It's about the present state, the way ISIS is getting decimated, but we have a sizable number of fighters there. And given the kind of intensity of warfare and the number of groups proliferating and fighting, now it's very difficult to actually look into the crystal ball and predict the future. But I have a question from Ms. Berman and for Dr. Pipes. How do you see it really panning out, especially given the fact that the short-termism of the regional powers that are involved in the entire fighting the process is actually precluding any meaningful cooperation? So you have Turkey with its own interests there, Iran with its own interests, Americans with their own interests, Russians with their own interests. So there is no meaningful collaboration probably in the offing which would really lead to the conclusion of the fight, so to speak. That is one. So where would the fighters go? What is precluding the meaningful collaboration? Will it come through or not? That is first. Second question is for Mr. Vladimir Evsey. You were talking about collaboration to really prevent those jihadis from returning to Central Asia and arresting the spread of ISIS or the ideology. But the problem is that the powers that are being co-opted in SCO, some of them are actually quite complicit here. We are seeing talks of talking to the Taliban, presenting Taliban as a moderate faction, a moderate power, while fighting the ISIS. Now, you can't have an organization like the Taliban being co-opted into a fight against the ISIS, made them, look more respectable. So, is it possible that Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan, all fighting, presenting Taliban as a moderate thing and then taking and ensuring stability in Afghanistan, because the entire axis is linked? So I request Daniel to respond first, followed by Berman and then Vasily.
Yeah? Oh, okay. I've been deputized. So let me sort of try to respond to both that question and to Dan's comment, because I think they're germane. I desperately tried in coming here to Delhi to have a U.S. politics-free conversation, but clearly that's not possible. So let me opine as delicately as I can on why I hold the views that I do. Because I think ultimately, in the United States, like in every other country, all politics is local. And so the level of U.S. commitment to the fight against the Islamic State, the level of American willingness to cooperate with other allies, is in part a function of American political fatigue. The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq has taken a toll on the American electorate. And the second complicating factor in this is that at least so far, and I agree with Dan completely, I am not a betting man. I have little children and therefore no disposable income. But if I did, I still wouldn't bet on this administration, on knowing what it's going to do. But I would point out that this administration has been very long on rhetoric in terms of fighting the Islamic State, of bombing the Islamic State, of sending troops. But what it hasn't done, at least not yet, is it has not articulated a vision of victory. It has not told us what it counts as a victory, what it will say at what point it will say, yes, our fight against the Islamic State is won. It is possible that President Trump, in fighting the Islamic State, means that he will leave no stone upon stone. But just think about the amount of resources that's going to require. And then think about the fact that the American electorate is tired and it doesn't want a protracted conflict. And therefore, I think it's at least possible to consider that we will, for all sorts of reasons, leave the fight unfinished, at least in part. And this is where the international aspect becomes so important. Because one of the most constructive things, in my view, that the new administration in Washington can do is to compel greater burden sharing among countries that have previously been free riders in the coalition to fight the Islamic State, including many of the Gulf states, which have really piggybacked upon coalition efforts without giving meaningful contributions. And these are not necessarily military contributions. We're not necessarily talking about troops. But there has to be at least the appearance of equal investment in this coalition in order to broaden it and to sustain public support for it. And I think that's going to be the challenge that's going to preoccupy the new White House over the next half year.
Good. You would like to respond? No. Okay.
It is bad idea to think that we may thaw Shiite-Sunni war in Syria. It is incorrect. It is more typical for Iraq. A lot of Arab Sunni take war on the side of Bashar Assad. So, Shiite-Sunni confrontation is not typical for Syria. Of course, for solve problem of Syria, it is important trigger Russia, Iran, and Turkey. But at first, for empty north part of Syria. If you look into how to take war with Islamic State, in my personal view, it is very important Russian-American military cooperation. It is necessary to empty Raqqa. It is necessary to empty Deir ez-Zor. It is necessary to take war with Islamic State. So, in my view, now we have good opportunities to cooperate with United States. If United States take decision for really military cooperation, we may to empty Raqqa, but not Turkish troops, no. Not Syrian Kurds, not engagement to go to inside of Raqqa. It is only Syrian army made to do. So, if United States is ready to cooperate, Russia will be support this idea, and we may together delete Islamic State now at whole. But if United States will be think, no, really for us it is very important to change Bashar Assad, we cannot cooperate. So it is now, we wait, really position, try to understand really position of United States. If United States is really to take war Islamic State, we are ready to cooperate. But this cooperate between Russia, Iran, and Turkey will exist. United States, for Russia now, no necessary to return to Syria. Russia stay in Syria. Russia have 2 military bases in Syria, in Tartus and Latakia. But for United States, it's very important to return to Syria. But for return to Syria, it is necessary to cooperate with Russian Federation. So we have different aims. For us, it is majority stability. For United States, it is important to return to Syria. So it is. But if you about Afghanistan, of course, in Afghanistan, if you look in what really people take war in Islamic State in Afghanistan, Taliban. Why? Salary is high. 3, maybe 4 times salary is higher if people from Taliban go to Islamic State. It was one of reasons. What will be in the future? Now it is difficult to predict. Maybe Islamic State will be extension, maybe no. Of course, we are speaking about take war. We may saw how take war in Syria between radicals. Sometimes take war, sometimes united. So it is bad idea think that if Islamic State take war with Taliban, will be continue. Maybe stopping. Maybe cooperate if will be necessary. Because Taliban is very different too. See, Haqqani, for example, it is very, very radicals. In my personal view, It is Haqqani is not different from Islamic State if speaking about method of radicals, of terrorist acts. Russia is ready to cooperate with other country in Afghanistan. I visited Afghanistan last October. I took part in Herat dialogue. We may to cooperate in Afghanistan now. Russia, China, engagement other countries, including India too. So, if will be mutual find opportunities to stabilization, it is necessary to use this potential. It is better, of course. I finish.
I think there's a last question from here. Okay.
Thank you, from Indonesia. So my question to Mr. Vladimir Esef. So based on communication Indonesian networks, I mean from ISIS, that the first that after Abu Bakr al-Adnani, ISIS spokesman, killed and then posted by Abu Muhammad al-Muhajir. And the second one, one terrorist organization in Syria and Iraq named Jabal al-Nusra, affiliated with Al-Qaeda and joining the ISIS with the new name Jabhat Assam, and then led by Abu Muhammad al-Julani, one who first established the ISIS militant movement. And then when ISIS lost in Fallujah, Manbij, and also East Mosul, Tikrit, and then al-Baghdadi hiding in the tunnel under the Raqqa. And then nowadays we get the new information that al-Baghdadi ran away to Gulf between Iraq and Syria. So, and also we have information that last couple months before that ISIS will remove the new central gravity and south part of Asia. And now we can understand that it's already done by ISIS. By Annaba said that we have new province, what we call Walayat al-Pilipini in southern part of Filipina. So my question is, we also got some information from the network that al-Baghdadi will remove the central gravity to Afghan in the border with Russia. Is it my question is possible or not? And then the second question that last couple of days in Afghan there is a bomb and then some attack in hospital and kill 38 innocent person. Is this possible committed by ISIS? Thank you.
No, a lot of questions, but unfortunately you are united, not united events. No, for example, you speaking about Manbij. Manbij, in my personal view, have special agreement between Russia and Turkey. What is special agreement? Manbij, Syrian Kurds go away, Syrian army go to Manbij. It is very important for Recep Erdogan because Recep Erdogan organized a referendum on April. For them it is necessary speaking. Syrian Kurds go away from Manbij. Not speaking that Syrian army go to Manbij. So ISIS or Islamic State not engagement in this process. It is question between Russia and Turkey cooperation because it is necessary for Recep Erdogan. Where is now al-Baghdadi? No, I don't know. We have different information, maybe died, maybe no. You know that near 10 deputies of this man, or maybe for change, if he'll be died. We have information a lot about this, but between Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have problems. But what is really Al-Qaeda in Syria? Al-Qaeda in Syria is Jabhat al-Nusra. Jabhat al-Nusra on different name now. But Jabhat al-Nusra now separated from Islamic State. I don't know how to cooperate between. Between it is complicated, but for us, it is important to separate it. separated now, Jabhat al-Nusra majority in Idlib provincial. It is different. It is between Jabhat al-Nusra in Islamic State. We have a lot of zone. But I cannot understand full information about Afghanistan. Maybe it is personal. Ask because it is no full understand. Okay.
What about Jabhat al-Assam?
If I could just put in a final word. February 13th, 2012, the Iranian government, according to the New Delhi police, organized a terrorist attack in New Delhi against a diplomatic mission, the Israeli diplomatic mission, in which an Israeli was injured and 3 Indians were injured. I think this is quite different from anything else. It, as Mr. Berman pointed out in Syria and Iraq, yes, there's this flow of volunteers to ISIS, but there's also the Iranian organized flow against ISIS. And the fact that it's a state organizing it, in that case or in the case of New Delhi 5 years ago, I think is of extreme importance. And while ISIS is horrid and spectacular, we must remember that it is the Iranian Republic of Iran that is most dangerous here and around the world.
Thank you very much. We are not having any more questions because 8:40, I've been given the time limit now. I won't try to sum up. All I'll just say is that you can see from the responses of the panelists who are real experts that there is so much which is not available in the media. And it all comes from there, ground knowledge, depth of knowledge through their contacts, etc. And you can also gauge that the future as far as West Asia is concerned and the future of the prominent groups such as Daesh or Al-Qaeda are concerned, it's all a question of disruption, which direction this disruption takes them, and how that disruption ultimately manifests in their strengths emanating in those areas. It could be Africa, it could be West Asia itself, it could be Central Asia, it could be South Asia. And we are increasingly seeing it moving further towards Southeast Asia. So we'll call it a day there and hope that you've enjoyed this session. Thank you very much. I request you to give a good applause to our panelists.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed a very scintillating session. May I please request the Honorable Chair, General Syed Atta Hasnain, to felicitate Shri Daniel Pipes, the President of Middle East Forum, USA. May I request the Chair to kindly felicitate Ilan Berman, Vice President, American Foreign Policy Council, United States of America. May I request, sir, to also felicitate Shri Vladimir Evseev, the Deputy Director of the Institute for Commonwealth of Independent States, Russia. May I request the Director of the India Foundation, Shri Vinod Bawri ji, to kindly felicitate our Honorable Chair. With this, we come to an end of the second day for the CTC 2017. We will now break out for dinner. The dinner is being hosted by Shri Ajit Dovalji, the National Security Advisor of India. We break out for dinner in the living room, and the entry to the living room is via the lobby. Please enjoy your meal, and tomorrow we reconvene for the third and the last day of the CTC 2017 at 9:15. Thank you. All of you are cordially invited for dinner.